Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest. I am Jack Grossman. No Coach Lieberman today. Um, New Year. I'm actually, as you can tell, this isn't my normal setup. If everyone's watching on video, I'm in Chicago right now doing some work stuff. So Louisville beat North Carolina. Mikel Brown committed, and I'm like, okay, we got to get something out here. Make sure we have some reactions to what I would say is probably the best day rather in Louisville that Louisville basketball's had maybe since COVID hit. I mean, it's been 4 or 5 years that here's this being 2025 now since Louisville's had a day as good as Wednesday was for the Cardinals, where you beat North Carolina by 13, you get a 5-star commit. Incredibly huge day for Louisville. So I'm Jack Gross. We're going to react to it here for the next 20 minutes or so. Get a quick one out. Coach Leroy and I plan on being back on Monday, getting back into our regular routine post holidays, post Louisville, and kind of the college basketball dead period that we've been in, as well as, again, I'm in the middle of a 9-day stretch where I'm in Chicago for work. So it's been very, very busy on my end. But obviously, we're getting back into the swing of things here on Floyd Street's Finest, part of the Field of 68 podcast network, talking to everything Louisville hoops throughout the season. We will be back, getting into our weekly routine that we have been in for the vast majority of the season up until this past week or so. But subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, however you're finding this podcast, Apple Podcasts as well, and be able to react and be able to talk Louisville basketball with you. I really, really appreciate all that. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Grossman97, Blue Sky at Jack Grossman. And yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. Louisville, massive, massive win. It's not going to be the win where people say if Louisville's on the bubble, they go, oh, they beat North Carolina, they're going to get in. Because right now it's only a quad two victory for the Cards. UNC's 42nd in that coming into today. They'll probably drop another 4 or 5 spots after losing by double digits on the road to UofL, to be completely honest. But it's a blue blood team. It's a big home game. And for the first time in the Pat Kelsey era, Louisville has delivered in the big home game. They, fell short, fought violently, but weren't able to hold on against Duke. And they had the Ole Miss and the Tennessee pretty ugly games there. So they're finally able to break through and get a big win on their home floor and add a signature victory against a team that is as big of a brand as you can get, a traditional blue blood there in North Carolina. That while it's not going to be I said signature, it's really not a signature win. While it's not going to be the biggest win all year that you hope is, obviously right now West Virginia, according to the metrics, is a much bigger win. They're 29th in net. That's your only quad one win on the year. You're going to get shots. Not a lot in the ACC, but that's why this is so important, because there's not a lot of big opportunities out there for Louisville. But you do get Pittsburgh twice. That's going to be huge. You get Clemson coming up in a week. That's going to be a big one. Another quad 2 game as well. You get SMU on the road. You're only another quad 1 game. But because Louisville has so many little opportunities to get quad 1, quad 2 type wins, every chance you get becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So that is big, not just because it's North Carolina, but because it's a quad 2 win. It was less of a statement / signature win and more so just a necessary victory the Cards needed to have going up against this North Carolina team. Like a game that could end up being a quad 1 win down the road if Carolina gets their stuff together. And because they still have RJ Davis, who's an absolute stud, Elliot Cadeau and Seth Trimble is maybe the best backcourt in the country. Obviously, Trimble didn't play in the game on Wednesday against Louisville because of the injury, and that was a big deal. We'll get into that in a little bit, why that was such a big deal there that they missed Seth Trimble on both ends of the floor. And Louisville did a great job of taking advantage of that. But it's still a team with a lot of talent that could make a run and end up being a quad 1 win. But even if it stays at quad 2, very important that Louisville is able to pick up this win. And really, how are they able to do it? If you look at the stats, and if you would have told me before the game that Louisville would shoot 6 of 26 from 3, 23%, 25 of 39 from the free throw line, 64%, and missed not 1, not 2, but 3 front ends of 1-and-1 on back-to-back possessions in the second half, midway through the second half. And that Terrence Edwards, one of your 2 best players, would only be 2 of 12 from the field, how the hell would you be able to convince me that they won by double digits? And that is a big credit to Louisville. We're seeing them now be able to win games in different ways. And that's something that is paramount when it comes to trying to, one, make the NCAA tournament. But when you get into the NCAA tournament, that's what you have to do. You have to be able to win games in multiple fashions. With Louisville showing now they can beat Florida State on the road by hitting 16 threes, whatever it was. You can go and beat North Carolina at home where you can't shoot the ball into the ocean unless you're Rain Smith. And you're missing all these free throws. Some of your best players aren't playing well, and you're still able to clamp down defensively and get things done. Now, I thought this was a really good matchup for Louisville because North Carolina was not going to be able to take advantage of UofL's small front line. Yes, Traore is back. Yes, Roos is starting to play a little bit better. Yes, James Scott played one of his best games, if not the best game of the year. But I think a lot of that was because North Carolina, this isn't, Kennedy Meeks, Isaiah Hicks. Those dudes aren't walking through that door. There's no Armando Bacot anymore. There's no, Tyler Hansbrough sitting on the sideline doing color commentary for Carolina radio. He's not suiting up. Tyler Zeller is not suiting up. This isn't the North Carolina front court that we're used to. Jalen Washington, Van Allen Lubin, they're fine, but they're nothing special. Jalen Withers is there too, former Louisville player Jalen Withers. But this is a very beatable Carolina front court, and Louisville was able to take full advantage. They were +2 in the paint today. You think about all the big games Louisville's played and lost. Tennessee killed them, 44-14 in the paint? Duke absolutely demolished Louisville in the paint. So did Ole Miss, Kentucky as well. Louisville was able to beat Carolina. They had 38 points in the paint. I don't have it on me, but I would wager a decent amount of money that 38 points is by far the most Louisville's had in the lane this season. They were great attacking the basket. Chucky Hepburn took advantage of North Carolina not being able to stay in front of defenders, which, again, they were missing Seth Trimble. He's their best on-ball defender. That is who would have been guarding Chucky Hepburn. And I don't think he would have completely shut down Hepburn, but I also don't know. Maybe Hepburn scores 18 points instead of 26. And if you do that, it's a completely different game. But Hepburn had 26. He got to the free throw line 20 times, drew 13 fouls, and it all came because Elliot Cadeau, RJ Davis, Ian Jackson, whoever the heels threw on him with Seth Trimble out of the game, could not stay in front of him. That created shots for himself, like out to the free throw line, to create open shots for guys like Rain Smith, who had one of his best games as a Cardinal, hitting 4 threes, dropping 17 points, and James Scott as well, 11 and 8 in a game where he was so aggressive and so good on both ends of the floor. There was one play. The only time I was really frustrated with James Scott was in the middle of the first half. There was one play where Chucky made a great move to get into the lane, found Scott, and he didn't dunk the ball. He tried to lay it in, got fouled. Should have been an easy and one if he just finishes strong through that one, and he ended up missing both free throws after that. But other than that play, he was so good in the lane. Carolina's front court was so focused on Chucky Hepburn, which, to be fair, they were put in it's a pretty bad spot because Carolina's guards couldn't stay in front of Chucky. Carolina's big men were overcommitting, and the other wings and other Carolina defenders weren't rotating on the back end, and that left James Scott just wide open under the hoop. And Hepburn and Smith and Hadley, all those guys did such a great job of just throwing the ball up there and just letting James Scott go finish for you. Little lob, alley-oop, just dunking the ball. Very, very good. He was really good on the defensive end as well, being able to get a couple block shots, including one key during that key stretch of about 90 seconds left. That I thought really sealed the game because Louisville ended this game on a 13-1 run, and I thought the two key. I mean, obviously it started with Chucky getting fouled on the 3-pointer, hitting all 3 free throws. Then Rain Smith hits a 3 as well to get back to 7, get the lead up to 7, a 3-possession game. That I thought was an early dagger. Carolina still could have made a run after that, but that's where I felt like, okay, Louisville's kind of gaining control of this game. But then James Scott absolutely sealed the deal, where with about 90 seconds left in the game, he gets an offensive rebound off the missed shot. They get the ball back out. Hepburn breaks down the defense yet again and gets into the lane, finds Scott, easy finish with a dunk, puts Louisville up 78-69, then gets a block on the other end, and then ends up finishing the possession with a defensive rebound. And that was just 4 things. a two-possession trip. James Scott did four things: the offensive rebound, the dunk, the block, and then the defensive rebound. That really sealed the game for Louisville. They came down, they hit free throws on the other end, went up 11 with again, minute 20 or something like that left. At that point, the game was signed, sealed, and delivered just all over at that point. James Scott, phenomenal in this game. And I think the play that sparked it was, again, we talk about Seth Trimble. Not only did that impact what Carolina was able to do on the defensive end, on the offensive end, it changed how Louisville got to defend the Tar Heels. Instead of probably having Chucky Hepburn guard RJ Davis the entire game, which, again, Chucky's one of the best on-ball defenders in the country, but you would still like to give him some different looks, be able to, rest Chucky a little bit as well. You don't want him chasing around RJ Davis for, a full 40 minutes. And probably having to put Terrence Edwards on Seth Trimble, which gives you a matchup nightmare where I guess Hadley would have had to guard Ian Jackson because you want Rain Smith to guard Elliot Cadeau. Instead, you don't have that issue because Seth Trimble's not playing. That allows you, one, to alternate Hepburn and Terrence Edwards on who's guarding RJ Davis. And they both were fantastic guarding RJ Davis. They limited him to just 4 or 14 shooting. The ball pressure was great. Edwards' length was a great changeup compared to what Chucky Hepburn does. And that really disrupted RJ Davis as well, to where he had 7 points in the last 4 or 5 minutes of the first half. And other than that, he was really a non-factor offensively the rest of the game. As I said, 4 or 14 shooting, only had 12 points. In the other 35 minutes of the game, he only had 5 points. The rest of the game, Louisville defended him very, very well. I know Ian Jackson had a really big second half, but the Cardinals did a great job of that combination of Edwards and Hepburn of really pestering RJ Davis. And the play that kind of kickstarted Louisville's 13-1 run was really on the defensive end. When they're up 70-69, they're on their heels. Carolina made their run, an 8-0 run to really get back into the game. And you had Van Allen Lubin standing with the ball in the wing, trying to get the ball back out to RJ Davis to reinitiate offense. And Edwards was denying the ball in the passing lane, textbook defense. And Van Allen Lubin, instead of, trying to do something else or just holding on to the ball, waiting for someone else to make a cut, kind of panics, throws the ball, tries to force feed it into RJ Davis, ends up throwing it over his head, turns into a backcourt violation, and then Hepburn gets fouled on the 3 the next possession, and that kickstarts the run for Louisville to go running away with this game. So again, the defense was spectacular. I think it's the best defensive game Louisville's played this year. It really, really might be. They were fantastic on that side of the ball, limiting Carolina just 4-16 from 3, 40% from the field. And as I said, RJ Davis was a complete non-factor. The other thing they were able to do, and again, this helps a lot that Seth Trimble didn't play, but I talked about it on Twitter earlier in the day. Elliot Cadeau was going to be a big key in this game. If he was effective, that would probably mean trouble for Louisville, because Louisville's game plan was, we're going to try to mask Rain Smith on Elliot Cadeau and hope that he's not going to have a good offensive game, because he's a guy going into the game on the season was only 9 of 36 from 3 and was a 21% three-point shooter last year. He's not a proven three-point shooter yet. He can drive into the lane some, but you can really sag off of him, make him a jump shooter, and there's games where he's non-existent offensively, and one of those games was on Wednesday where, he was only 1 of 5 from the field, missed both the three-pointers he took, and that allowed Louisville to play almost 4-on-5 and really hide the fact that Rain Smith is not a great on-ball defender and not really a great defender, period. He did have a nice play where he was able to wall up, stay vertical, and not let Ian Jackson get by him and force a miss. That was a really good defensive play from Rain Smith in the second half. But still, he's had his struggles on that end of the floor throughout the year. But that really was able to hide that weakness for Louisville. That was smart game planning by Pat Kelsey, and again, was another added benefit of Seth Trimble not playing this game. I still think Louisville wins the game if Trimble would have played. I don't construe this into me thinking that's the only reason they won, but maybe it's a 5-6 point game instead of a 13-point game or something like that. And I thought for a long time that this was a good matchup for Louisville. And you were looking at the big games, name brand wise. I know Carolina's not ranked like they were earlier in the year, but you looked at the Duke game, the Kentucky game, Atlantis, Tennessee, Ole Miss. I always thought this was the one Louisville had the best chance of winning because North Carolina's front court wasn't very good. And because their strengths matches up with Louisville. I thought Louisville matched up very well in North Carolina, and that's what we saw play out on Wednesday evening. We saw Louisville's strengths be better than North Carolina's strengths, and that's why they won the game. And that's including the reigning ACC Player of the Year, first team All American, preseason ACC Player of the Year again for this year, RJ Davis, absolute stud. So that is full credit for Louisville to be able to get this win on their home floor. Now, again, this isn't going to be the win that gets Louisville in the NCAA tournament. There's not going to be, unless they sweep Pittsburgh, which is a net darling this year. They're 10th in the net right now. That is really the biggest chances Louisville has left at Pitt on January 11th, and then Pitt coming back to the Yum Center on March 1st. Other than those two games, it's really not going to be about the quality of win for Louisville, which is not a great way to have to live, but that's just kind of where Louisville's at with the fact that one, Indiana has not aged like fine wine, to be completely honest. That's not going to be a quad one win. West Virginia, that is going to be a really good win. They're 29th in net. Like they might move up a spot or two again after the Louisville game today, and they just went knocked off Kansas in Fog Allen Fieldhouse without Tucker DeVries and two of their three best players. So that is a game I'm confident that we'll say, unless Louisville beats Pittsburgh once or twice, it's probably going to be Louisville's best win on the year per the net. Because West Virginia is a really good basketball team. They've surprised a lot of people, and that's a win that's really going to track and age throughout the year for Louisville. But you need more than just one quad one win. If you're able to get a split with Pittsburgh, get at least a couple. It's hard when it comes to Louisville making the NCAA tournament. The ACC being down this year hurts them so much because you're looking at a team like right now. Louisville is 1-4 in quad one games. They only have three more the rest of the year as of today. Now that can change again. Like Carolina could go back into quad one. Clemson is 36th in the net. That could maybe get to a quad one if they're able to get back into the top 30. You look at Florida State is 81st in the net. Louisville obviously won there a couple weeks ago. If they're able to get into the top 75 as a true road win, that would be quad one. But I have a hard time. Like, it's possible for some of these games to become quad ones, but the big issue is when all these teams are playing each other. Whereas in the SEC or the Big 12 the last few years, the SEC especially this year, you have such a great non-conference, and then you play all these teams. Every game's a quad one game. Literally, in the SEC this year, every game is a quad one game. You help your metrics by playing good teams. You take a team like Pitt or a team like SMU, who's 30th in the net right now, which unfortunately Louisville only gets to play once, and that's on the road in Dallas. SMU has to play, the Virginias, the Syracuses, the Boston Colleges, the Georgia Techs. Now Louisville's going to have to play too. Virginia Tech, all these teams playing them, and if you play some of those games closer than expected, even if you don't, those just playing all those tough, those quote unquote easier games, those lower rated games, it's going to naturally hurt your net rating. And that's going to be a tough thing that all the ACC schools, but Louisville as well, is going to have to battle. Because Louisville, after this Carolina game, we've talked about it ad nauseum, they only have 5 home games between now and March 1st. Over the next 8 weeks, Louisville has 5 home games. 9 of their 14 games are on the road. They're going to have to win some games away from the Yum Center, which Florida State's a great benchmark to say, okay, we can do that. Even though they lost the Kentucky game, they played really well in Rupp Arena, to where hopefully that's not a concern for you, because they're not going to be playing anyone nearly as good as Kentucky. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you right there. So Louisville's only had 2 road games, but they've played well in both of them. But that's still tough to keep going out on the road and playing teams that you're not going to get up for like you do at Kentucky or Florida State. You got to avoid losing to Syracuse up in the Carrier Dome or whatever the hell they call it now. You can't trip up at Virginia this Saturday. You can't lose on the road at Virginia Tech in late February. Those are pothole type games that Louisville's going to have to survive. And we've seen them, even though they've won all the games so far, we've seen them struggle with trap games. I mean, UTEP, they only won by 3. UTEP's a better team than, some of these other teams in the ACC, to be completely honest. Eastern Kentucky last Saturday, another trap game. And just a weird scheduling quirk with the holidays, to where it's your only game in a 2-week span between Florida State and North Carolina. You needed a Noah Waterman game winner to survive. So Louisville's been a little iffy in some of these games lately against, teams that aren't these name brand North Carolina, highly ranked teams. And they're going to be playing a lot of them. So they're going to need to clean that up, get back to where they were at the beginning of the year where they were blowing, not that these teams are the same level of cupcakes as someone like, you know, a Morehead State, for instance, but you gotta play better against the bottom half of the ACC and really try to help get some metric wins there, beat the spread, not just beat teams, but Miami at home on February 8th. That's a game you probably have to win by 20 points. Like you gotta be successful there. And that's going to be a big battle for Louisville here over the next couple of months. You're gonna have to win. You can't avoid a lot of losses. I mean, you can say that anyways, but if Louisville were in the SEC and they won 500, they'd probably be a six seed. I mean, that's just how good the SEC is. I don't know if Louisville would actually go 500 in the SEC. They probably wouldn't even have to go 500 in the SEC to make the tournament. But you're looking at this, and right now, for instance, KenPom has Louisville being projected to finish 13-7 in the league and 20-11. And I look at some of these games. They do have Louisville beating Clemson, and they have Louisville. They do not have Louisville winning either the Pittsburgh games or the SMU games. If Louisville goes 20-11, 13-7 in conference, but loses the three quad one games, it's crazy to say because it's a name brand like Louisville. It's in the ACC, and they won 20 games and had 13-7 record in the league. I don't know if that would be good enough to make the NCAA tournament. In fact, I don't think resume wise that would be good enough because you're doing the blind resume thing. You'd see 20-7, but they were to lose all three of those games and none of the other games become quad one games. You're there and said, really, we're going to let in a team that's 1-7 in quad one games? That's not how it works with the NCAA tournament. You got to beat some good teams there. You get a bigger sample size than you do with football, but you're gonna have to win, one of those Pittsburgh games. SMU would be huge also to help out that, and really just you can't take bad losses. Louisville hasn't done so far, but you can't afford any quad three losses, and I don't think they have any more quad four games. I can double check that real quick as well. They do not, so that's good. But they have 9 more quad three games. They got to be 10-0. Make at worst 9-1 in those quad three games. You're gonna have to you're gonna have to play well and can't take nights off in the ACC with how bad it is this year. It's just unfortunate how it is. Also, Mike, I don't want to get too downer, but again, I don't say that as in give up in Louisville making the NCAA tournament. I say that as that's why this North Carolina game, even though it's just a quad two game, was so important for Louisville. This is one of the better wins they're going to have on the season, and you get the cachet of it being North Carolina, which doesn't matter as much as it does in football, but still it moves the needle a little bit there on the basketball side as well. As I said, the biggest day in Louisville basketball that they've had probably since COVID, probably since in the 2019-20 season when Louisville whipped Michigan in a top 5 game in the Yum Center, or when they went, and beat North Carolina in the Dean Dome the year before Chris Mack's first year. It's been a while since Louisville's had a moment as good as this for the Cards. It's not just because of the North Carolina game. It's also because you get Mikel Brown. And I'm not going to say I'm not a recruiting guy. I might have to get, my guy Cam Drummond on here at some point to talk, because he's the recruiting dude that I know the best. I can reach back and see if Travis Brandon wants to come on or something like that as well. But I'll always love to have him on back in the radio days. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know everything about Mikel Brown Jr. But I can tell you this: in the 247 composite rankings, he is ranked 7th nationally and is a 5-star. Is the number 2. Or rather, in the 247 composite, he's the number 1 point guard, number 10 nationally. The 247 pure 247 rankings, he's 7th nationally, the second best point guard. Whichever way you want to cut it, he's a top point guard. He's a bona fide top 10 recruit, and he's a 5-star. And you just signed him over Ole Miss, Kentucky, and then also Maryland, Arizona, Indiana. We're kind of on the outside looking in there, but Ole Miss and Kentucky are the two you're getting him over. That is a big deal there for Pat Kelsey. I mean, there's been some talk about how he hadn't, gotten a high school recruit yet. When's that going to come? Not really angst, but just more so, especially on the rivalry side. You hear Kentucky fans say, when's he going to get a recruit? And this is kind of that answer. Like, okay, he's proven he can go. He can get a 5-star now. That was one of the biggest questions about Pat Kelsey when he came over from Charleston. Of can he recruit at the level as at Louisville? And I mean, so far so good. It's only one guy at this point, but even looking beyond the high school element, it's the transfer portal and how he cobbled together a roster that's going to compete for an NCAA tournament bid year one. It's, the fact that you trust him to be good in the portal again. And now you can supplement the high school guys along with it. Connie Roots, I think he's going to come along and be a good player as well. He's shown some flashes, starting to develop too this season. He's gotten some more playing time with all the injuries, which I think will help him in the long run in addition to that. So I think that's a big question answered as far as the recruiting goes. Mikel Brown, top 10 recruit. You absolutely take it signed, sealed, and delivered there for Pat Kelsey and co. And a great scene there with them announcing it at the Center during the North Carolina game, which I guess you could technically do now with the new NCAA rules that are always changing, and it's very weird. But anyways, that's pretty much all we got for tonight for today's episode of Floyd Treats Finds. Again, we'll be back, regular scheduled programming. Coach and I are planning on Monday at this stage to get things rolling again. Appreciate you guys sticking with us. Again, huge win for Louisville, beating North Carolina 83-70. We'll catch you next time here on Floyd